You stand in the shadowed cloister of a remote convent in the hills of Thessaly, the year 1480. The air smells of incense and wild thyme. You've dedicated your life to Christ, vows of chastity, poverty, obedience. Your days are prayer, silence, and service. Then you hear it, the thunder of hooves, the war cries echoing through the valley. Ottoman cavalry crest the ridge, the gates splinter. Soldiers pour in like a flood. You and your sisters, 22 nuns of St. Sophia, are dragged from your cells. This isn't a nightmare. This was reality in the Ottoman Empire. What I'm about to reveal is the hidden horror inflicted on Christian nuns and consecrated women during centuries of conquest and rule. Not the battles you see in movies, not the grand sieges, but what happened to the most sacred among the conquered when the armies moved on. This isn't exaggeration, it's documented in eyewitness accounts, chronicles, and even Ottoman records themselves. The evidence survives in forgotten archives and the stones of ruined monasteries. If you stay until the end, you'll understand why empires erase these stories and why we must uncover them. Hollywood and popular history paint the Ottoman Empire as a tolerant, multicultural paradise, grand harems of willing beauties, enlightened sultans, religious freedom under the millet system. They show heroic janissaries and exotic palaces. What they don't show is the systematic violation of Christian holy women as a weapon of domination. I'm talking about a pattern so brutal that modern terms barely capture it. The deliberate targeting of nuns during conquests, their mass rape, enslavement. The Ottomans themselves didn't invent a special name for it because to them, it was just part of victory. Here's what we know for certain. Contemporary chroniclers like Barbaro, during the fall of Constantinople in 1453, described Ottoman soldiers storming monasteries, ravishing nuns in their habits, then auctioning them as slaves throughout the empire. He wrote of nuns being abused even in the great churches, their vows mocked as they were sold for whatever price they fetched. This wasn't isolated chaos, it was policy repeated across centuries. Before we descend deeper, pause and look at the like button. If you believe the voices of forgotten victims deserve to be heard, even when it's uncomfortable, smash that button and comment where you're watching from. Because this isn't just ancient history, it's about what power does to the vulnerable when no one's watching. To grasp what happened to these nuns, you must understand how the Ottoman Empire processed conquered Christians like raw material in a machine of empire. This wasn't random barbarity, it was calculated dehumanization on a massive scale. It began the moment Ottoman armies overran Byzantine lands, the Balkans and beyond. When Mehmed II conquered Constantinople in 1453, or when forces swept through Greece, Cyprus or Armenia, they didn't just take territory, they harvested human spoils. Men of fighting age were killed or conscripted. Boys were seized under the devshirme, the infamous blood tax, forcibly converted and turned into janissaries. Children were sold across markets. Were designated as war prizes. But nuns, consecrated virgins, brides of Christ, their violation wasn't just physical, it was symbolic warfare against Christianity itself. Under Islamic law of conquest, non-Muslim captives lost protected status. They became property. You could do anything, and it wasn't a crime because objects can't be wronged. But the Ottomans went further. They weaponized spectacle and psychology. Conquests weren't just military. They were demonstrations of total dominance. Eyewitnesses to the 1443 sack describe scenes that should haunt any reader. In Hagia Sophia itself, once the greatest cathedral in Christendom, soldiers fought over the most beautiful captives. Noble women, virgins from secluded families, and nuns torn from convents were stripped, assaulted in front of altars, then chained for the slave markets. Barbaro wrote, all the nuns were led to the fleet and ravished and abused by the Turks, and then sold at auction for slaves throughout Turkey. Some nuns, preferring death, threw themselves into wells. Others were paraded through streets as warnings. In 1470, during the fall of Negroponte, Venetian reports detail nuns and monks crucified or impaled. In Cyprus 1571, after Famagusta, thousands of women, including religious, were loaded onto ships for Ottoman harems. Think about that. The same empire praised for tolerance systematically targeted the holiest women to break Christian resistance. The games weren't entertainment here. Chroniclers note Ottoman commanders deliberately assaulting nuns publicly to humiliate communities. It sent a message: your God can't protect even his brides. Resist. And this awaits your daughters, your sisters, your sacred spaces. Resist. Fie. Nuns weren't warriors. They were often from noble or devout families, choosing seclusion over marriage. Their lives were prayer, fasting, charity. Then conquest shattered everything. Ottoman forces under Turhan Bey raided the convent. 22 sisters captured. Accounts from Greek chronicles and later travelers describe them dragged in chains to markets. Some forced into harems, renamed, converted under duress. Others sold to households as domestic slaves, with the ever-present threat of assault. Their habits stripped, vows broken. Imagine the trauma, from silent prayer to screams in a foreign land. No ransom, no escape. Ottoman law offered no protection. Suicide was denied, guards watched to prevent it, as you'd be destroying property. This was psychological annihilation. Break the spirit of Christianity by defiling its purest symbols. The harems awaited many. Ottoman sultans and elites filled palaces with Christian captives. Most concubines were non-Muslim slaves, Circassian, Georgian, Greek, Armenian, preferred for beauty and to avoid Muslim family ties that could breed factionalism. Nuns as virgins were prized. Forced conversion was standard upon entry. No Muslim could remain Christian in the Sultan's household. But conversion didn't free them, it bound them deeper. Children born to concubines could rise high, but mothers remained slaves until manumitted, often after the Sultan's death. Some rose to power like Hurrem or Kozum, but most faded into anonymity, their faith erased. Archaeology and records confirm purpose-built systems. Slave markets in Istanbul, Edirne, Bursa specialized in white Christian women. Prices listed by origin, Greek, Balkan, Byzantine holdovers. Convents raided specifically for recruits. One 16th century report from a Venetian ambassador describes fresh captives from Balkan monasteries arriving veiled, destined for Topkapi's harem. Eunuchs often castrated Christian boys from Devshirme guarded them. The system was efficient, bureaucratic. Administrators tracked captives like inventory, age, beauty, origin. Greek nun, approximately 20, good health assigned to palace. This wasn't passion, it was infrastructure for domination. Graffiti and rare survivor tales hint at resistance. Some nuns scratched prayers into cell walls. Others feigned madness or illness. A few escaped, fleeing to Venice or Mount Athos remnants. But most vanished. Make resistance unthinkable when even God's brides submit. Occasionally, the horror surfaced visibly. In 1860 Damascus massacres, Christian quarters burned, convents stormed. Nuns publicly humiliated, assaulted. Western consuls reported mobs dragging sisters through streets. Similar, in 1895-96 Hamidian massacres, thousands of Armenian nuns and women targeted. The system persisted because it worked. Cheap rewards for troops, demographic shift through absorption, psychological terror. It faded not from morality, but exhaustion. The empire's decline meant fewer conquests, fewer captives. Slavery banned in 1908, but echoes lingered. Today, tourists admire Topkapi's harem as romantic. Guides mention silk and intrigue. The ruined convents in Greece, Cyprus, Anatolia overgrown, silent. Stones remember scratched crosses, desperate prayers. Ledgers in Ottoman archives list them as numbers. This was policy. Infrastructure. The other half happened in shadowed harems and households, after the crowds cheered victory. Those voices' vows silenced forever echo if we listen. And that's the nightmare they don't teach. If this revealed darkness you've never heard, subscribe, notify, comment your thoughts. We'll uncover more erased history next. But the horror didn't end with the sack of cities or the fall of fortresses. It followed the captives into the heart of the empire, into the slave markets, the barracks, and the shadowed corridors of elite households. Let's talk about the men who claimed these women as spoils. Ottoman soldiers and commanders existed in a world of brutal hierarchies. They were warriors celebrated in poetry and chronicles, yet many started as slaves themselves. Janissaries raised from Christian boys via Devshirme, or frontier gazis rewarded for raids. Their loyalty was bought with plunder, land, and women. Like Rome's gladiators, they were both revered and feared. The empire remembered rebellions like the Thessaly uprisings where disgruntled troops nearly toppled sultans. So how do you control men trained to kill, hardened by constant war? brutal discipline, yes, flogging, impalement for desertion, but also rewards, gold, timars, land grants, promotions, and access to captives. Sources hint at this primal incentive. European travelers and diplomats noted soldiers dividing women after victories, the most desirable going to officers. In the 1443 aftermath, chroniclers described troops fighting over nuns and noblewomen right in Hagia Sophia's ruins. The process was bureaucratic, efficient, the same machinery that managed taxes and armies handled human spoils. Captives were marched to collection points registered by scribes. Age, beauty, health noted in ledgers. Greek female, approximately 25, virgin suitable for service. Nuns stood out, educated, often from good families, symbols of defeated faith. Their violation doubled as conquest body and soul. Assigned to soldiers as temporary prizes or sold onward. Some entered military households as servants with constant assault risk. Others shipped to Istanbul's markets. Archaeology and records reveal the infrastructure. Slave depots in Bursa, Edirne, Istanbul had holding areas, small rooms with barred windows, chains evident in remnants. Venetian reports describe fresh Balkan captives arriving in chains, sorted like goods, beautiful ones veiled for palace inspection. Guards, eunuchs or trusted troops escorted them, doors locked from outside. What happened inside? Sources are veiled but clear enough. Rape as routine. No crime, because captives were property. Islamic war law allowed it for non-Muslims in conquest. This wasn't hidden vice, it was open policy. Sultans took fifths of spoils including humans. Maimed I himself selected from Constantinople's captives. Later sultans filled harems this way. But lower ranks got shares too. After Balkan campaigns, troops returned with Christian women as wives or slaves. Communities paid blood taxes in flesh. The message, victory means dominion over enemies' women. Defile their sacred to break their will. Istanbul's Avrat Pazari, the women's market, specialized in Christian females. Prices by origin, Circassian highest, then Greek, Armenian. Nuns fetched premiums, virgins untainted. Buyers inspected openly, stripping for examination. Rejected ones sold cheaper to brothels or households. Some chambers beneath markets or depots had benches, rings in walls echoing those Roman hypogeum cells. Travelers described cries echoing at night. Graffiti survives faintly scratched prayers in Greek crosses. One from a 16th century depot, Lord, remember your servant Maria. Names erased, replaced with Muslim ones upon sale. This was industrialized domination. Problems motivated troops, cheaply women cost nothing but chains. Reinforced hierarchy, even low soldiers tasted absolute power. Sent terror, resist, and your holy women end here. Historians debate details, sources biased, Ottoman records euphemistic, acquired females. In 1821 Greek revolt, reprisals included convent raids. In later Armenian troubles, similar targeting, not random, deliberate. Hardest, what it meant for the women. No diaries survive, erased deliberately, reconstruct from fragments. A nun from Thessaly convent, life of contemplation shattered, dragged out. Habit torn, symbolic stripping of identity. Marched in coffles, assaulted en route. At market, prodded, priced. Sold to a bey's household, domestic slave by day, forced concubine by night. Conversion pressured, accept Islam or suffer more. Children born raised Muslim, mothers sidelined. Waiting torture, hear auctions above, know your turn comes. No protection law sided with owner. Suicide watched against property damage. Psychological warfare. Break faith by forcing sin. Others absorbed, identities lost. Goal, erase resistance roots. Show Christianity powerless, even brides of Christ conquered. System broke sometimes. Rare escapes, nuns fleeing to islands, telling tales in Venice. Or conversions backfiring, women influencing households subtly. Generations internalized submission, faded not from awakening but empires weakening, fewer wars, fewer captives. Slavery reformed late, under pressure. Today, Topkapi's harem tours focus on luxury, marble baths, intrigue. Guides gloss over origins, ruined Balkan convents overgrown. Stones hold faint scratches, prayers unanswered. Archives list as inventory. This was policy, normal. The conquest spectacle was half, the other half in markets, households. After victory, cheers faded. Those silenced vows still whisper if we listen, but the nightmare deepened as centuries rolled on, embedding this cruelty into the empire's very fabric. Let's confront the rare moments when the horror broke through the veil, when individual stories pierced the silence of official records. Though most nuns vanished without trace, fragments survive, letters smuggled to Venice, diplomatic dispatches, traveller accounts piecing together fates. Venetian reports detail Ottoman forces storming convents, dragging sisters into camps. One anonymous chronicle describes a group of Augustinian nuns paraded through streets, habits ripped before shipment to Istanbul. Some forced into elite households as servants' constant vulnerability, others auctioned publicly. A surviving letter from an escaped captive, relayed through Venetian merchants, speaks of a sister named Caterina, taken from Nicosia convent, sold to a pasha's home, pressured daily to convert. She resisted, endured beatings, eventually vanished, likely killed for defiance. These weren't anomalies. Pattern repeated in Crete's long conquest, 1045-69. As Ottomans chipped away at Venetian strongholds, convents fell one by one, Chania's nuns captured en masse. European envoys reported hundreds of religious women loaded onto galleys, destined for markets. Some ended in sultans' harem, virgins prized for purity, forced bathing, renaming, instruction in Turkish ways. Conversion not just spiritual, it erased identity. Refusal meant isolation, starvation, worse. Now, the sultan's harem itself, heart of the system. Topkapi palaces' secluded wings housed hundreds, mostly Christian slaves from conquests or raids. Circassians, Georgians, Greeks, Armenians, nuns among them. Eunuchs guarded doors, but power lay with owners. Sources like Venetian Bailo reports describe new arrivals, veiled, trembling, sorted by beauty. Nuns' education made them valuable tutors for children, companions for valide sultans. But price was absolute submission. Lady Mary Wortley Montagu, 18th century English traveller, glimpsed this world. She wrote of harem women as slaves in every sense, origins hidden behind silk. Many bore children rising to power. Harem Sultan, Ukrainian captive, started as concubine, became Suleiman's wife, mother of heirs. But she was exception. Most nuns didn't rise, they broke. Faith forbidden privately, publicly performed Islam or faced punishment. Archaeology hints at scale. Excavations around Topkapi reveal quarters for hundreds, baths for ritual cleansing before presentation, slave tags, ledgers, fragments list origins, Greek female, religious order, age 22. Bureaucracy again, human inventory, resistance flickered. Some nuns smuggled messages via sympathetic eunuchs, often Devshirma Christians themselves. Others feigned compliance, secretly prayed. Rare escapes. One 17th century account of Armenian nun fleeing with Greek merchant help, reaching Venice, testifying before Senate. Her words, "They took our vows as trophies, our bodies as spoils." Church recorded her as martyr, though she lived. Psychological terror refined over generations. Targeting nuns wasn't incidental, it was ideological. Defiling Christ's brides proved Islam's supremacy, Christianity's weakness. Chroniclers note commanders ordering public violations in conquered churches, altars desecrated. Message to survivors: your faith protects nothing. Occasionally visibility backfired. In 1603 Vienna siege failure, retreating Ottomans abandoned captives. European forces freed thousands, including religious women. Reports flooded west. Emaciated nuns recounting years in households. Forced marriages, lost children. Sparked outrage, fueled propaganda, but also preserved truths. Later, massacres exposed persistence. 1821 Greek War of Independence. Ottoman reprisals targeted convents deliberately. Tripolitsa fall reversed Greeks, massacred Muslims. But earlier, in Peloponnese, nuns impaled. Convents burned with sisters inside. Similar in 1890s Cretan revolts, 1910s Balkan wars. System solved empire's needs elegantly. Motivated warriors with spoils, shifted demographics via absorption, terrorized subjects into compliance. Cheap, effective. Troops returned from campaigns with wives captives legitimized post-conversion. Hardest truth, long-term fates. Children born Muslim, mothers manumitted late, identities fractured. Some influenced subtly Christian rituals lingering in harem corners, but cost immense. Generations of women, ghosts, vows broken, names erased, faded gradually. 19th century reforms under Western pressure, slave trade bans 1850s, full abolition push. But real end came with empire's collapse after World War I. Captives dwindled as conquests stopped. Today, Topkapi tours emphasize opulence, golden cages, political intrigue. Guides mention beautiful concubines, rarely origins. Balkan convents rebuilt or ruined, few plaques note sieges. Archives in Istanbul, Vatican hold ledgers, testimonies, stones of old markets silent. This was infrastructure for domination policy, not madness, normal to perpetrators. Spectacle of victory, half the story. Other half, shadowed rooms where sacred became spoils after cheers faded. Voices persist in fragments, scratched crosses, whispered prayers. If we listen, they accuse, but the veil occasionally lifted further, revealing names and faces behind the anonymity. Though the empire worked hard to erase them, some stories survived through diplomatic reports, escaped captives, and church records. Let's uncover a few that history tried to bury. One such tale comes from the fall of Otranto in 1480, not a convent, but a city where religious women suffered similarly. When Ottoman forces under Gidik Ahmed Pasha stormed the Italian port, they massacred thousands. Chronicles describe priests beheaded on altars, women and girls dragged away. Among them, religious sisters from local orders faced the same fate, violated publicly as symbols of conquered faith, then chained for transport. Some accounts name a group of nuns herded to the cathedral, forced to watch desecration before their own assault. Survivors who reached Venice spoke of sisters choosing martyrdom, jumping from cliffs rather than submission. Closer to the Balkans, the 1669 fall of Candia, Crete, after a 22-year siege brought fresh horrors. Venetian defenders surrendered, but Ottoman troops rampaged anyway. Reports from Franciscan monks detail convents breached, nuns captured alongside civilians. One dispatch named Sister Maria of the Dominican order in Heraklion, taken with others, shipped to Chios markets, sold into household slavery. Her fate unknown, but typical forced conversion, renamed, absorbed. These individual threads weave into the larger tapestry. The harem wasn't just luxury, it was the endpoint for many. Topkapi's records, though veiled, list arrivals by batches, new females from Crete campaign 20 virgins, including religious. Eunuchs processed them, stripped of habits, bathed ritually, clothed in silk veils. Instruction followed Turkish language, Islamic rites, palace etiquette. Resistance meant the bastinado or worse. Conversion formalized entry, refusal prolonged suffering until broken. But power dynamics shifted inside those walls. A few rose spectacularly. Take Kosum Sultan, Greek origin, like Anastasia, captured young in Balkan raids. Entered as slave concubine, bore sons, maneuvered to Valide Sultan regent, effectively ruling the empire. Her story exceptional, but rooted in the same system. Christian captive transformed through forced assimilation. Others, like Safai or Nurbanu, Venetian or Greek slaves, wielded influence via sons. Yet most remained shadows, servants, lesser concubines, aging out to manumission or obscurity. Archaeology echoes this. Topkapi excavations uncover harem quarters, tiered dormitories for newcomers, private suites for favorites, bath complexes for purification. Eunuch barracks nearby, many Devshirme Christians themselves, castrated boys guarding former coreligionists. The irony brutal, victims policing victims. Graffiti rarer here, palace walls guarded, but traveller accounts preserve whispers. Bassano da Canal, 16th century Venetian, described hearing muffled prayers in Greek from harem wings. New arrivals clinging to crosses hidden in hems until discovered and confiscated. The system thrived on this erasure. Targeting nuns amplified impact, brides of Christ becoming mothers of Muslims, children born legitimate heirs raised in Islam, demographic conquests subtle but profound. Visibility sometimes forced change. Western pressure mounted in 19th century. Tanzimat reforms promised equality, restricted slavery. Slave trade banned piecemeal, Circassians 1854, Africans later. But enforcement lax until empire's end. Yet echoes persisted into 20th century. During Balkan Wars 1912-13, retreating Ottomans raided convents again. Greek reports from Macedonia describe sisters assaulted, monasteries looted. Similar in World War I atrocities, Armenian, Greek, Assyrian women targeted, religious included. The nightmare didn't vanish with morality, it crumbled with the empire. After 1922 population exchanges, captive flows stopped. Slavery outlawed formally. Today, Topkapi's harem gleams for tourists' intrigue, jewels, power plays. Convents across Greece, Cyprus, Anatolia stand rebuilt or ruined, few markers for lost sisters. Archives hold fragments, auction lists, conversion registers. This was calculated domination infrastructure masking as tradition. Normal for centuries. The victory parades showed triumph. The shadowed processing showed cost. Those erased vows, broken habits, they linger in stones and silences. But the system didn't just absorb the broken, it rewarded the breakers. Let's turn to the perpetrators, the men who benefited from this machinery of conquest. Ottoman elites, soldiers, and even common troops lived in a culture where victory entitled them to spoils, human included. Janissaries, many originally Christian boys torn from families via devshirm, rose to elite status, yet participated in the cycle. Frontier gazis, rewarded for raids, brought back captives as proof of valor. Sources revealed division of spoils. Commanders took the choicest women, including religious ones, as personal prizes. After 1443, troops argued over beautiful captives in Hagia Sophia's shadow. Lower ranks shared the rest, temporary access before sale. This wasn't frenzy alone, it was structured. Islamic conquest law permitted non-Muslim captives as property. Nuns, as ultimate symbols of infidel purity, were deliberate targets, violation proving dominance. Bureaucracy managed it coldly. Captives registered, origin, age, condition. Religious female, Greek, virgin, palace, suitable. Ledgers survive fragments in archives, transported in chains, sorted at depots. Markets like Istanbul's Avret Pazari displayed them veiled, inspected intimately. High bids for virgins, especially consecrated ones, rarity inflated value. Inside households, fates diverged. Many became domestic slaves, labor by day, assault by night. Owners justified under law, no crime against property. Conversion pressured relentlessly, accept Islam for mercy, refuse for torment. Most yielded eventually, identities fracturing. Harem endpoint for elite selections. Topkapi's wings filled with Christian captives, Greeks, Armenians, Circassians. Nuns rare but documented, prized for untouched status. Processed ruthlessly, habits burned, bathed, renamed. Eunuchs often devshirm, castrates oversaw. Irony layered, former Christians guarding new ones. Archaeology uncovers scale. Topkapi quarters housed hundreds, segregated dorms, ritual baths. Traveler accounts describe arrivals huddled, whispering forbidden prayers, resistance crushed, flogging, isolation, goal, total submission. Yet flickers of agency. Some delayed conversion, preserving faith secretly. Others used beauty or wit to navigate rare rises like harem, slave to sultana. But exceptions highlighted rule, most erased. System-motivated empire. Rewards bound loyalty, troops fought knowing victory brought dominion over enemies sacred. Demographic engineering, children born Muslim, swelling ranks. Terror suppressed revolt, know your holy women vulnerable. Visibility rare but damning. Escaped captives reached Europe, testifying in Venice or Rome. Church martyrologies recorded defiant nuns beheaded for refusing conversion. 19th century massacres. Damascus 1860, Hamidian 1890s, repeated patterns. Convents stormed, sisters humiliated publicly. Reports detail mobs dragging nuns, assaulting as crowds watched. Targeting consecrated women wasn't lust alone, it was erasure. Defile Christ's brides to prove superiority. Break communities by shaming protectors. Survivors carried guilt, ostracized sometimes for dishonor, faded with empire. Reforms bowed to Europe. Trade curbs 1850s, abolition pushes. But practice lingered in fringes until collapse. Today, Topkapi gleams, harems toured as exotic intrigue. Guides whisper power games, silk veils, origins glossed, beautiful captives. Balkan monasteries rebuilt quietly, no plaques for lost. Archives hold truths, lists testimonies. Infrastructure mask cruelty as custom. Policy, not aberration. Victories raw, celebrated conquest. Silence afterward hid cost vows shattered in shadowed chambers. Those prayers, clinging to crosses until torn away, they endure in fragments. Here's the full story of what Ottoman forces inflicted on Christian nuns, a nightmare buried for centuries, but preserved in chronicles, archives and stones. The empire's tolerance myth crumbles under weight of evidence, systematic targeting of holy women as conquest trophies. This wasn't random. It was weaponized domination, bodies and souls claimed to shatter Christianity's hold. From 1453's fall to late massacres, pattern held, raid convents, violate publicly, enslave survivors, force assimilation. The voices silenced most thoroughly were nuns, but scratches on walls, smuggled tales, ledgers they speak. Empires hide horrors in shadows. This one operated openly, bureaucratically, normally. If this uncovered darkness long erased, subscribe, notify, share thoughts below. We'll expose more forgotten histories next. Thank you for staying to the end. The truth matters, even when it burns.